Time we have learned how to use the Monte Carlo simulation algorithm to simulate the harbor system problem. Now table 5.15 gives the sum of the simulations for the harbor system, and the number of ships taken as input in the simulation algorithm is 100. Okay, and as we know these are the outputs which are calculated from the algorithm itself. So just this chart is given accordingly for the simulation of 100 ships via the algorithm designed before. Okay, now the thing is that, as I said, we can just modify the algorithm to some extent depending on the needs of the harbor and the ship owners. So let us see a few examples which they are giving here. Okay, so from 5.16 we can see that the reduction of the unloading time. Before that, now suppose you are a consultant for the owners of the docking facilities, what would be the effect of hiring additional labor or acquiring better equipment for unloading cargo, so that the unloading time interval is reduced to between 35 and 75 per minute per ship. Okay, that means this is one modification which is demanded. He said, suppose each ship owner tries to maintain minimum time in the harbor. Okay, then what it should do? It should increase the labor, so that the once it starts unloading, the cargo is unloaded very fast. Okay, acha. So that means, suppose this modification is taken into an account of the Monte Carlo simulation algorithm, then via taking that modification, this is the data simulated for exactly again 100 ships. Okay, so if we just remember in our Monte Carlo simulation algorithm, unload I was taken to be between 45 to 90. So we generated the random numbers between 45 to 90. Let us see once. Unload I. This one, time required to unload ship I is varying between 45 to 90. So this one, once we started simulating the algorithm, what did we do? Randomly generate between one and unload one for the first ship, and then again generate random pairs between I and unload I. So as I already said, this unload I was the random number which was generated keeping into account the starting point which was asked for, this one remaining between 19. Now in the 5.16 table, if we want to generate the data, what we have to do? We have to give the modification, that means modify according to the condition the ship owners are now engaging more and more labor, so that the unloading time is decreasing. And how much decreasing? It is becoming between 35 and, as they say, 75, I guess. So now we have to generate, if I want to simulate according to that situation, then this algorithm will only work, but only this part, this generate pair of random integers, this unload I will now be generated, will now be random numbers, that means positive and integer lying between 35 to 75, right? They say 75, so let us check. 35 to 75, so this will now be the boundary. So this much modification needs to be input or needs to be taken into consideration in the Monte Carlo algorithm once we try to just adjust this part of the modification, right? Now so accordingly, say suppose we have modified our algorithm, then this 5.16 will be coming. Just one example they are giving. Suppose they have simulated 100 number of they have taken n equal to 100 in the simulation algorithm, and 100 number of shifts are taken as the input, then these are coming as the outputs. Okay, and now you see one thing, what we are decreasing the unloading time, right? So how we are going to get that unloading time per ship? That means average. Okay, so average time of a ship in the harbor 74. Okay, acha, and average waiting time 19. So difference in this and this gives you the unloading time, because if the ship is spending, any ship say is spending 74 minutes total in the harbor, out of which it has to wait for 19 minutes, that means it has to wait when the unloading is not beginning, that means at that time it is not engaged, that means remaining time 74 minus 19 will give you the time for which it is engaged, that means for which it is unloading the cargo. So that means here it is 55, so it is lying between 35 and 75. Okay, so this is it. Again for another 100 simulations. Okay, again this will come, again for another 100 simulations this is coming, again for another 100 simulations this one, again for 100, again for 100, like that. Okay, so each time here also for 100 simulations you are giving this one, average time of a ship in the harbor, and this all these outputs which were there in the algorithm itself, that we have discussed these outputs before. So each of this column is representing a simulation of 100 ships. That means n equals to 100 is considered for each of these columns. Okay, for each one. Here also the same thing is happening. Okay, and if you just calculate here and here, you will see each of this difference is lying between 35 to 75. That means the unloading time is generated accordingly. Okay, now so via the modified algorithm, table 5.16 is generated. Okay, achha. So for this column algorithm is applied, again for this column algorithm is applied, again for this one. So 1 2 3 4 5 6 data sets are given via the modified algorithm. Here 6 data sets are given via the just the simple algorithm which we have designed. Okay, now let us see another possibility. Okay, achha. So this is done. So you can see from 5.16 that the reduction of the unloading time per ship by 10 to 15 minutes decreases the time ship spent in the harbor, quite obviously, because the unloading time is decreasing, especially the waiting times. Okay, see why they are saying the waiting times, because suppose ship 1 is unloading faster than it was doing before, then obviously ship 2 which is coming and standing in the quay need to wait for smaller time. So suppose, let me just give one example. Suppose ship 1 is taking t equals to, initially before we just simulated or run the modified algorithm, if we run the simple algorithm, then suppose ship 1 was taking t equals to 50, t equals to 50 minutes only it was taking. Okay, and suppose it has arrived at t equals to 20, so total t equals to 70, the spending time of the ship 1. Achha, now there the ship 2 was coming at the time t equals to 50. Okay, that means what, for 70 minus 50 to 20 minutes it has to wait, the ship 2. Now in the modified algorithm, MA I am writing modified algorithm, suppose this has decreased, and it has become 30, from 50 to 30 suppose it has become. So it is arriving, ship 1 is arriving at the same time 20 minutes. Okay, but it is taking only 30 minutes, so total 50 minutes, or it's 35 minutes it is taking, so total 55 minutes it is taking in the harbor, ship 1. But again the ship 2 is arriving at t equals to 50, so now it has to wait how many minutes, 55 minus 50, that means 5 minutes it has to wait. So you see, initially, that means in the standard algorithm, if we run, the ship 2 has to wait for 20 minutes, but in the modified algorithm it has to wait for only 5 minutes. Same will be the case for ship 3, ship 4 and ship 5. Obviously basic idea is, if each ship is taking smaller time to unload, obviously the next ship will be waiting for lesser time. Okay, so the waiting time of each ship will also decrease. Okay, so this is what they are saying here. Achha, now if we are considering this, but there is a slight another modification which we have to consider once we take this unloading time decrement in the new algorithm. Okay, so this is what they are saying here. However, the percentage of the total time during which the dock facilities are idle nearly doubles. Quite obviously, if the quay is not forming, the ships are coming, unloading very fast and then going off, it may happen that the next ship has not yet arrived. So suppose I am giving the example as we get before in the modified algorithm, that t equals to 20, ship 1 has arrived, and it is taking only 30 minutes to unload, so total 50 minutes, and now say ship 2 has arrived at t equals to 55, then that means what, 5 minutes gap. Again, so suppose it is further decreased, it is taking only 10 minutes to unload first ship, then how many times it is taking, 30 minutes, but ship 2 is arriving at 55 minutes, so What is the idle time for the harbor? 25 minutes. So obviously if any ship is coming and unloading very first, it might happen ki the next ship has not yet arrived. If the next ship has not yet arrived, that means what? The docking facility is sitting idle. So obviously the idle time will increase in this way. Okay, so that is the thing. If you see in this 5.16 algorithm, say percentage of time dock facilities are idle 0.25, but initially when there was no modification given, it was 0.18. okay, sorry, it is not 0.15, so it is 0.25, my mistake. It is 0.25. It was initially 0.18. Initially means in the unmodified algorithm it was 0.18. It was 0.25 for the 100 simulations here. Again for here 0.17 was here, 0.33 was here. Okay, and likewise you compare any one. If you see, it is almost doubled this time, because we are decreasing the unloading time. Okay. Achha. So if this is the case, then that means it is to some extent a loss for the harbor system, because if they are sitting idle, then they are not at all doing any business in that time, right? Achha. So there should be a trade-off maintained. Achha. So let us see what they are next saying. Achha. The situation is favorable for ship owners because it increases the availability of each ship for hauling cargo over the long run. Obviously they are doing their work very fast and going away to do the next one. Okay. Achha. Thus the traffic coming into the harbor is likely to increase. Obviously if the ships are coming and going up very fast, just unloading very fast, then means again in another ship is coming, again another one is coming, so the traffic is going on increasing. Okay, so the traffic coming into the harbor is likely to increase. If the traffic increases to the extent that the time between successive ships is reduced to between 10 and 120 minutes, the simulated results are shown in 5.17. So see, here is some trade-off. That means the traffic will obviously increase, but how much? How much? So that it modifies another factor in the algorithm. How much it is modified? The traffic coming into the harbor is likely to increase if the traffic increases to the extent. So this gives you how much? That the time between the successive shifts is reduced to between 10 and 120 minutes. Successive shifts time between, that means that the factor was between I. If you remember the algorithm, it was between I. That is the time gap between the arrival of ship I and I minus 1. Okay, so this now is modified. Initially, if we just recall back, initially for the unmodified algorithm part, what was it? The between I should be lying between 15 to 145. Okay, and accordingly we have just generated the random number between 1 for the first ship and between I for any ith ship. For the I running from 2 to up to n, the random number was generated. So now this has to be controlled. It will now it will not lie between 15 to 145. It will lie between 10 to 120. As they are saying here, between 10 to 120. Okay. See, between 10 to 120. So between I am writing in short. It should not be less than 10 and it should not be greater than 120 minutes. Okay. So if we now put this modification in our algorithm, then you will be getting something like table 5.17. Okay. So you see here the time between the arrival will be decreasing and you will be getting this one now. Okay, as the output. Again we are taking the same. See, this standard should be kept the same, obviously, because if we suppose here we are taking 100 ships, here we are taking 1000 ships, another in 5.15 we are taking 2000 ships, that will not do. The standard, that is the input, should be the same. N equals to 100 for each of these. Okay. Achha, so in that case we will be getting 5.17, and you can just simply see here कि now the idle time for the docking facilities has again decreased. See, 0.25 was for 5.16, here 0.15, 0.33 it is 0.19. Okay, so obviously the docking facilities is now making more business if we use this part of the if we use this algorithm instead of this one. Okay, so here the unloading time is also less, so that is beneficial for the ship owners, and again the idle time is also less, so that is also beneficial for the harbor or the dock facilities. So it is beneficial for both of these ship owners and the harbor facilities. Okay, So it is yet another modification which we have considered. Okay, so that is what they said. The simulated results we are getting by putting between 10 and 120 by table 5.17. We can see from the table that the ships again spend more time in the harbour with the increased traffic, but now the harbour facilities are idle much less of the time. Moreover, both the ship owners and the dock owners are benefiting from the increased business, as I already said, because the unloading time has increased. So ship owner is making profit, and side by side for 5.17 I am saying the harbour facilities are sitting idle for lesser number of time or lesser amount of time. So the harbour facilities are also making profit. So 5.17 up to the three tables which are given here, 5.17 is the most beneficial for the scenario considered. Okay. Achha, now another thing is, see, in the algorithm already I have said कि we are generating random numbers uniformly lying within any interval which is specified. Suppose it was 15-145 for one and 45 to 90 for another. Here it was lying between I was generated here, and between 45 to 90 unload I was generated. And what we said, कि the random numbers are generated uniformly. There was no biasness in it, right? But now suppose the situation is such that one harbor is there where if we generate like this simulation, the data which will be coming will not be matching to up to the accuracy level mentioned with the data which is actually generated from the harbor system. That means what? That means what is making the problem here? The assumption. What assumption? Ki we are generating the random numbers unbiasedly. That's why it may happen in the harbor system where this unbiased random number generation will create a problem. So in that case, what should we do? We should take the harbor system's data and then we should feed it into our system so that the random number generation will be modified, so that there is some biasness in it. Biasness, how I am saying, suppose we have discussed before in the simulation of the probabilistic behavior, how we can generate or how we can rather simulate the throwing of an unfair die. Just like that we can simulate here also. But for that what we need? See, there was what we said, ki phase occurring first phase occurring is suppose occurring with 0.1 probability, phase 2 or lying the probability lying between 0.1 to 0.2, phase 2 0.2 to 0.6, like that. So biasness is coming here. So that biasness who will give us? The real life situation data set will give us. So once we get that, we can feed it or we can modify the algorithm according to that. So what we do, we instead of generating the random numbers uniformly within the interval, we will follow that probability or biasness to generate the random numbers. So very simple example is given here. So for that what we have to do, as I said, we have to collect the probability. That means we have to collect the measure of the biasness which is associated with the original system. So suppose data collected, see here it is saying data collected for 1200 ships using the harbor facilities. So this is actually the real life problem from where we are collecting the data. This is not generated from the algorithm. This is we are collecting from the real life harbor. Say suppose there is some harbor system where this is actually occurring. So we will take this, and suppose one tries to modify the algorithm, he or she has to put this data set or the information from the data set into the algorithm, because then only the algorithm will get modified. See, in the algorithm the two basic things which can be modified is the random number generation, nothing else, because the remaining everything is coming according to the pattern. Just we are adding or subtracting according to whatever is required. So main thing that can be modified here is this part, step 1, that can be modified here, and another step 5, because here only this random number generation is coming. Rest only depend on them. All the other steps depend on them and the situation. Okay, there we cannot modify anything as much. Okay, so keeping that in mind, see here what they are giving. So suppose between time interval 15 to 24, okay, time between arrivals this is measuring. So time between arrivals, that means between one and second ship, if the gap is from 15 minutes to 24 minutes, say number of occurrences 11, that means 11 ships are there which is maintaining the time gap of between 15 to 24 minutes. So suppose ship 1, suppose I am saying ship 1 is arriving at say t equals to 10, shift 2 is arriving at 25 minutes. Again shift 3 is arriving at again 25 plus 16 say 41 minutes. So like that 11 shifts has arrived, such that the gap between their arrival is lying between 50 to 24 minutes. Similarly, this one for this one, this one, this one. So suppose between 25 to 34 minutes the gap will be. Such shifts, number of shifts which has arrived in the facility is 35. So what is the total occurrence here? 0.009. How we are getting it? The total number is 1200 shifts are coming. Out of it 11 shifts are coming from this one. So just if you just calculate the percentage, 11 by 1200, you will get 0.009. Again here 0.029, like that. So see, as I said, we have to feed into our, we have to modify our algorithm via what? Via the biasness or the biasness parameter. That will be the probability here. So here it is coming. This one, this one, this one, like that. Okay, so the arrival time, that means between I, which we took to be, we choose to be a random number generation uniformly between 10 to 120 or 15 to 120, whatever that was given there, that will be now modified. So it will be 0.009 for this one, 0.029 for this one, and likewise. Okay, similarly this was, we are taking care of one random number generation, that will be, instead of uniform, that will be a biased random number generation now. Another was the unloading time, that is also to be taken care of. So here you are seeing key between 45 to 49 minutes, within this range of time, number of occurrences 20. That means 20 shifts are there which will be coming, such that their unloading time lies between 45 to 49. So suppose 46 minutes unloading time is occurring for, suppose 5 shifts. Again 47 minutes unloading time is occurring for, say, 10 shifts. So altogether 20 shifts are there, such that we can put the unloading time lying between 45 to 49. Similarly 54 shifts were there which arrived, such that unloading time was lying between 50 to 54, and likewise. So total 1200 shifts. Again the probability of occurrence, the same thing of strategy of calculation, 20 by 1200 into 100. Okay, so these are the biasness which is occurring for the unload I. So again the random number unload I, which was initially taken to be unbiased random number generation between 45 to 90 minutes, will now be modified according to this probability. Okay, so yet we will just generate another new algorithm. Okay, and suppose now that we are satisfied with the assumption that what I just said here, we are not satisfied with the assumption that the arrival time between shifts and the unloading time per shift are uniformly distributed. So this needs to be modified over the time interval 15 to 145 and 45 to 90. So suppose we are not just good enough with this part of the assumption using the algorithm. Okay, so what we will do, we will try to modify. We decide to collect experimental data, that means data set from the original scenario, okay, for the Harbor system, and incorporate the results, that means include the results into our model. Okay, as discussed before, so for the unfair coin say or unfair die. Okay, we observe hypothetically that 1200 ships using the harbor to unload the cargoes, and we collect the data displayed in the 5.1 week. That means we are taking this data set. In just one word, we are taking help of this data set. Okay, so actually they are giving the idea ki what, we will not just give an algorithm using this. They are giving the idea ki you may use this type of table also to modify your algorithm. Okay, so now once you take care of this thing, then next, so this is a type 5.1 it again. So adding together the probabilities of each individual time interval between arrivals as well as probabilities of each individual unloading time interval, these computations result in the cumulative histogram. So cumulative of greater than type, that means what, 0.009 was for the interval. So suppose I am considering only the unloading between 9 time. Okay, that means the time gap between successive arrivals of the ships. Okay, so 0.009 for the interval 15 to 24. This is a histogram controlling this unloading between 9 time. Okay, so see here 15 to 25, 0.009. Then 25 to 35, it is what it was given, 0.029 plus 0.009, as it is a cumulative type, so we will go on adding. So from 15 to 34 total, it will be 0.009 plus 0.29, so 0.38, 0.038. So here it comes. See, let me enlarge it a bit more. This from 15 to 25, 0.009, but for 15 to 35, this is 0.38, 0.038. Achha, this one actually you can get the idea also if you recall back the definition of a probability distribution function. There also what we did, probability fx equals to minus infinity less than equals to x, and there what we did, if we divide also into smaller sub intervals, then you have to go on adding them up. Okay, so exactly the same thing is occurring here, and they are saying it is as a cumulative histogram, which is a histogram cumulative of greater than type cumulative. That means you are going on adding again for the same second one. So suppose lying between 35 to 44, you have to add 3 up. Okay, so 0.009 plus 0.029 plus 0.035. So here it will be 0.73 from 15 to up to 45, and this continues. Okay, this is for the between I time, and this is for the unloading time. Okay, here also the same thing, it is also cumulative greater than equal to type. Okay, so here it is first one, second one will be this one, and the next one, so suppose here, so this part now we are considering. So 20, not 20, this one we will consider 0.017, then we will add with it 0.05, 0.45, and you will get what they are saying here, 0.062. Okay, and this continues, and you get the histogram for the unload I time occurrence. Okay, so this is it. These are some of the modifications which are discussed here. So main part of the takeaway, the main part you have to just consider or keep the concept you have to keep here, and the algorithm, the Monte Carlo algorithm for the general taking the unbiased situation. Okay, you have to just keep the concept clear there. Okay, and rest are just comparison which are just discussed here. Okay, so as to give the idea ki obviously suppose they gave this type of algorithm modification here, someone may ask for another type of algorithm modification here, so how do you incorporate it? You have to keep that in your, that how to incorporate, you have to keep that in your mind. Okay, so let us stop here.